In this PowerPoint, we are going to learn about CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and every CSS document must be saved with a .css file extension. So CSS describes how HTML elements are to be displayed on screen, on paper, or other media. But in the context of this course, where CSS is used to describe how the HTML elements that we have created in our past few classes, now we're ready to add the style to them. We're ready to add the presentation to them. So CSS is where we add that information. So CSS saves a lot of work. It can control the layout of multiple web pages all at once. So you can control the layout of thousands of web pages all at once just using one central style sheet. External CSS style sheets are stored in CSS files. So basically, CSS is used to define styles for your web pages, including the design, layout, and variations in display for different devices and screen sizes. So we're going to learn something else later on in the course when we have covered basic CSS. We're going to learn how to create a different style for the same website, but to appear in different ways on different devices. So on the on your desktop, it will look different than it does on your phone or on your tablet and so on. So when CSS first came out, it solved a really big problem. And it's been a while since CSS has been around, but when it did come out, it was amazing because HTML was never ever intended to contain tags for formatting a thing like web page. That's not the intent of HTML. Yet people did it during the browser wars. They used presentational elements, which is wrong and bad, but they did it because they're in competition. So HTML was, created to describe the content of the page, like what the heading is, what the paragraph is, what the footer is, what the link is, things like that. Only for the structure, not for the presentation. So during the browser wars, when things like the font tag came out, color attributes were also added to the HTML3 specification. It was a nightmare for web developers because fonts and color information were added to every single element, and this became a long and expensive process and also resulted in inconsistencies. So not only did it not show up properly on different browsers, even if it did, it was a nightmare to have to go into each individual element and tell each individual element to be a certain design or a certain font weight or certain color or have a certain background. It's not easy to design something like that. So to solve this problem, the World Wide Web, W3C created, consortium W3C created CSS. CSS removed all that style from the HTML page, and now we should never ever have any style in the HTML page. Okay, so when you use headings or when you use any kind of HTML element, you should never use it because you like the way it looks or because you're trying to control the way something looks. You should only use it because of the meaning that it has behind it. Okay. And I just stress this because I have seen students using H2 instead of using a paragraph, and they did that because they liked the way it looked. Now, if something is paragraph text, it should always be in a P tag. H2 should only be for titles, and even then H2 should only exist if it's a title under H1 and so on. So you have to really think about, why and how you're using the structure of HTML. And never ever use it for presentational reasons. Leave that for CSS. That's why we're learning CSS now. All right, so how do we add CSS? Well, there are 3 ways to insert a style sheet. You can have external CSS, okay, an external sheet. You can have an internal CSS, which is you put it in the head tag, and we'll look at that later. Or you can have inline CSS where you put it right in the element. Okay, so the external CSS, we use an external style sheet. You can change the look of the whole site just by changing one file. Each HTML page must include a reference to the external style sheet inside of the link element, inside of the head section. So I think you can't see it here because my video is covering it. So basically use a link tag, just like you would link to a favicon, you would link to a style sheet from inside of your head tag. So let's go take a look at how to do that right now. Go. So I'm going to go into Atom, and you should too. Let's go back to your Saffron website, and this is what we can add style to. So I'm going to go into CSS folder, and I'm going to go, oh actually I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to first go into index. Okay, and I'm just going to show you how to add a link to a style sheet. Now we don't have this style sheet yet, but don't worry, we'll create it later. So underneath title, I'm going to go link. Okay, oops, link. And the href will be in CSS folder, and it will be called style.css. Now I have to make sure that I do call my style sheet style.css, and it is going to be saved in the CSS folder. Okay, next I'm going to have relationship is style sheet. Okay, and then I'm going to close it. Okay, so file, save. So now this home page, index page, is linked to the style sheet. When I go into contact page, the contact page is not linked to the style sheet. It doesn't have that link, so I have to go add this link to all my pages, all my web pages. Okay, and I'm just going to go File, Save All. And there we have it. I've added an external style sheet to all my pages. Next, let's go take a look at the other ways to add a style sheet. You can also have an internal CSS. An internal style sheet may be used if one single HTML page has a unique style. Let's say maybe the home page is going to look different than all the other pages. So the internal style sheet is defined inside of a style element inside the head section. So you can have something that looks like this. In the head section, you would have this style. So this stuff is, don't worry, we'll learn about what this stuff is. This is the style CSS rules, the style declarations. This is what tells the browser how to display something. This is the information about presentation. This is usually in the style sheet, a style.css style sheet, but I'm going to put it in the head tag, okay, because this is a internal style. I'm just showing you a different way to do something, okay? So if I go in here, so maybe instead of having the link to the external style sheet, I can just, enter. I have some formatting things here that I copied over. So I can just enter the style right in here. Okay. Instead of linking to a style sheet. So here I have a style for body, and I have a style for, here we go. All right, and I have a style for body, and I have a style for H1. Okay, and those are the two different ways to add a style to your page. You can either have it as a link to an external sheet or put it right in the style tag in your head tag.